much rain, etc. you're having, or how dry the air is, how fast the grasses are growing, etc., etc. That grass is now recovering, and if your soils are poor, it's more likely to put up seed very quickly, and probably the earliest is about 25 days. Some plants will start pushing up seed. When you look into that plant, the leaves have come to a point, but here comes a flower out of that plant. The minute it starts flowering, that is the time it should be grazed, and it can be from 30 days, anything through to 120 days. But you will record that and decide what your recovery period for the grasses you have. The grasses you plan for, because they are more nutritious, probably need a longer recovery period to be established. So if 30 days happens to be the recovery period of the grass you have, you can assume that probably the more nutritious version of the grass that might grow in your soils will probably be in the region of 45 to 50 days recovery period. So I have established that 30 days is my recovery period for the grasses I've got. I'm wanting to go to a 45-50 day recovery period. I then say to myself, okay, I'm going to punt for 35 days recovery period to start with, because I'm encouraging the plants that are going to take the place of the existing plant, which is a better plant. So I'm encouraging it to come into my swath, but I'm still grazing the plant that is there in a relatively vegetative stage. You don't get perfection on the first day. You move into perfection over time, fixing the soil, putting carbon in and on the soil, and achieving the result you want. So, to achieve that, this is the formula that you might start with. I do not like giving you formulas because they will fail. So it's size of paddock times the recovery period. I now use 35 days because I'm moving towards 45 or 50 days, divided by the whole area to be grazed. So you have a property of X. Are you using the whole property for this herd? Are you dividing the property into two? What are you doing? The whole area that is available to that herd of livestock. Size of paddock times recovery period divided by the whole area to be grazed will give you the number of days stay in that paddock. You go through all your paddocks, and we're assuming here that it's a pretty much even type of grasses that we're going to be grazing. The mix in your paddocks is roughly the same. So we end up with a situation of number of days for the size of the paddock and where you want to be in 35 days time, back in paddock number 1. So when you've done the calculation for however many paddocks you've got, paddock number 1, 2, 3, 4, however many paddocks, you've got the result. Days stay on the right hand side. You add those days up and it should come close to 35. If it is not close to 35, you've done a problem, or you've made a problem, you've made a mistake in the calculations. Go back and recalculate. It should be close to 35. Do not split hairs. Close to means anything from 33 is good enough. Anything up to 37 is good enough. It's close enough to 35. You just want something to start. You start with a 35-day recovery period and you move your livestock. And as you go, and you're doing this now for the first time at the beginning of the growing season, but please don't try it in the non-growing season because you'll have a wreck. So we gathered in the grain season, we've gone, we've grazed, you've seen what I've done. I've taken a bite off the top of the grass. I've built stockpile in my land, in the lands or paddocks is my stockpile. And I've explained to you with Greg where he bought hay and put it out, and the cattle preferred the stockpile to this expensive hay that he had bought. And I stick by that because anything that comes from the earth and is grown on the property has the correct bacteria and fungi in it to promote digestion in the rumen of that animal, and will do the animal better than the bale which is coming from elsewhere and has different bacteria and fungi spores in it. So we graze and we continue, and by the third graze you will see a result in terms of amount of food on your property. Keep it simple. Don't complicate it. Any questions on that? This is your starting point. You monitor and fiddle with the recovery period depending on the result, which is monitored by the cattle, which are the best monitoring instrument that you can find. You're looking at the left-hand side, the fill in the rumen between the rib and the hip. First rib and the hip. Needs to be full. If an animal has a full rumen, the chances are it is gaining weight. I don't think there's anything too complicated about that, people. Just start. And you will adapt and adopt as you go. Good. Now I have to give you the rated paddocks while I've got you here, because some smart guy will say, oh, but my paddocks are so different. Who cares? The car doesn't. I don't either. But I'll give you the formula, and this is the formula. Size of paddock times rating times recovery period divided by the whole area to be grazed gives you the day's stay. Your best paddock is 1. Your half best paddock compared to 1 is 0.5. So if it is the half best paddock, the rating is 0.5. You are not going to come anywhere near your recovery period. So you're going to have to go back and lengthen the stay in the paddocks that are 1, and you're going to have to use your observation and guess how many days you're going to stay. But it is a guideline, and you can actually work it. So when that total comes close to 35, be it 37 or 33, who cares? You then start using your rated. My advice to you is do not use that, the rated, until you have experienced the straight. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So when I'm starting out, the size of my paddock, if I want to graze an area of 2 acres, and I want to move them forward.
No, hang on. Thanks for the question. Use the size of the bigger paddocks, the fixed fences. The subdivisions inside will be a portion of the day's stay in the bigger paddock. So the bigger paddock is 10 days. I can then divide it into 10 one-day moves, or whatever you want. Whatever fits your quality of life. Thanks for the question. You do not want a whole lot of calculations, because as you go through, I will tell you to do calculations for the changing, because I will also say to you, depending where you live, if you're living in a non-brittle environment, when it gets dry, and people, I'm giving you stuff that I shouldn't be giving you because it's a formula. But anyway, I will tell you this will help you manage. So when the grass goes grey, because you've now gone into a drought, and you've monitored the rainfall, you've written it on your grazing chart, this is how much rain I've had. We dry, I can see the grass is going grey, it's not growing, it's not bright green. For every week at that, if your recovery period is about 30 days, for every week it does not rain, add 1 day to your recovery period and recalculate. So you do all these calculations before you start grazing, because when you get into jam, you're not going to do the calculations. If you're in a brittle environment and your recovery period is around about 50 to 60 days, for every week it does not rain, when it is dry, when the grass starts growing grey, you add 2 days to the recovery period. So if your initial recovery period was around about 50 plus days, for every week it doesn't rain, you add 2 days to the recovery period. And as you add days to the recovery period, your days stay will increase in that paddock. So the principle behind the grazing is you've got food in front of you and you've got food behind you. If you've got the incorrect recovery period, you'll end up with no food behind you and not be able to stay in a paddock for another day or two to facilitate the dry, and you'll have a wreck. So monitor, ongoing, manipulate, recorrect, recalculate, and get it right for your area. All I'm trying to do is teach you what you need to do on your own ground to make a living. I like you to start with an inclusion zone first, where you put the animals in, and remember yesterday I said there were 2 loose. For an inclusion zone, you want them tighter, so maybe in an hour, everything that you saw there would be trodden on the ground. You don't need water in your inclusion zone because they're only there for an hour. So you leave the fence up because what grows in that inclusion zone is going to be different from outside the inclusion zone. And you can then extrapolate what the property can carry and develop by the new plants that are growing in the inclusion zone. They're not going to be the same as the plants that are growing outside the inclusion zone, where the density of the livestock is lighter. I hope I haven't confused anybody. Yes, sir.
Sometimes I think I must sleep for a period. I missed the inclusion zone thing. I mean, I was there yesterday, but I didn't really understand why and what is the idea behind the inclusion zone. So maybe I'm not the only one?
No, well, I repeat it and I'll repeat it again. But remember, you'll only go back home with 2% of what you thought you heard. and don't feel alone. Don't feel alone. So the more you hear this, the more you read it. And why do you think I'm prepared to give you my lectures? Why am I saying to you, you're welcome to record? Because there is just too much information in one dump for you to actually contemplate and do it all. You can't do it.
So answer his question. What is an inclusion zone?
I beg your pardon, I must start myself when I'm listening to it. I assume you guys knew it. I've said it so many times, an inclusion zone is a small area that you're experimenting to see what you can do with your soils, your livestock in your time as to changing the environment at soil surface level. What is going to grow, what is not going to grow.
But you've got to put them in there extremely tight. We didn't do that yesterday.
No, I did explain that. How much more do I need to re-explain? At 4 times the density that Greg thought he was doing an inclusion zone.
So you're gonna keep an inclusion zone all season and go back and look at that every once in a while?
So an inclusion zone, because it's so dramatically removed from your conventional grazing plan, where I've given you the calculation, how many days stay in the paddock, you leave that fence up and observe what grows there. So because you gave it extra animal impact, everything is on the ground. It is going to stop growing. It is going to stop growing for the moment. What you've actually done is given the equivalent of non-selective grazing. Everything is on the ground. Now, non-selective grazing, please don't try it. They don't tell you how much they have to spend to keep animals alive. They show you pictures of what non-selective grazing does, and you will observe it in your inclusion zone, because what happens there is going to be very different from what happens outside. And it's these pretty pictures that gets everybody jumping into the water. And then, oops, I ran out of money.
And they're feeding supplement behind this cattle.
Yep,
And they're irrigating. They're not saying that little part of the deal.
correct.
So be careful. There's a guy promoting it really heavily in, total grazing they call it, but you get in the background what's going on up there. He's got center pivots. It's not center pivots, it's cannons. I designed the farm, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. There's cannons. He gets to irrigate out of a 65,000 acre lake. He's feeding them grain behind that big mob. He's taking it to the dirt. And people, oh, look what he's doing. Well, he's not telling the whole story. Just be careful.
But remember, it is your choice. Whatever you choose, look in the mirror. Find the problem. Yes, sir.
Would an inclusion zone look differently in an arid environment, a brittle environment compared to a non-brittle environment? Would you bale graze in an inclusion zone? What are the densities
Yeah,
that you
so I
would
was going to
recommend?
take it further. Your inclusion zone, wherever you are, non-brittle or brittle environment, you then go and buy some bales and put them down and do the same, but not in the same inclusion zone. Do one next to it. Okay, so here I've got more carbon on the soil. I'm going to go in with my animals, same number of animals, put them in there till everything is trashed, let them out, and then you've got observance. 1 is as is, 2 is more carbon. Do I need to increase density with how the way I'm grazing? What do I want to achieve? How long do I want to change things? And the power is in your hands to do what you want to do. And again, I need to remind you that I regard a supplement as a crutch. So you don't use a supplement while you're doing this, because when your cattle go out to graze, you've used the formula there straight, the one under red, and you have calculated the number of days stay in there. But now you've had a curved wall and they've thrown a drought. Nature has, with the chaos, thrown a drought at you, and you need to adapt and do something different. Watch the animal performance. If the animal performance is starting to drop, you might like to put in a supplement to keep the performance up, while you as a human is learning what to do different in terms of your recovery period and grazing practice in terms of density.
So about an acre, a hectare?
No,
500
I don't know how many animals you've got.
It's all about density.
It's all about density.
Well, okay, so 500,000 pounds of live weight, 250,000 pounds.
You do what you feel comfortable with. So in a brittle environment, obviously the density is going to be less, because you don't need so many feet to tread everything down. Guys, a bit of common sense in here. Yes.
When you're monitoring the effect of that inclusion zone, one with bale, one without putting down bales, where are you focused on? The impact on the plants and the soil, or on the animal performance, or is it even?
Remember, every decision you make, animal performance comes first.
Right, okay.
Okay? So at all times you do what animal performance is, because without animal performance you're going to go broke. So you achieve animal performance and you gradually move towards what you've learned with your inclusion zones in terms of fixing the soil and improving the whole. So if I use just the inclusion zone without the added carbon, I would work with that for a while, and I'd only bring the carbon in on the 4th or 5th year. Okay? So this is what I've got because this is what I'm working with. This is why I don't have to spend any money. So you do it, you see the result, you see what plants are growing, you'll see how quickly the plant's growing, the soil is more alive, there's more carbon in and on the soil. All the things that I've been talking about yesterday are actually going to be happening in that inclusion zone. Over time, you will change the species because the fungal bacterial relationship has changed, and the plants that used to be there which captured more energy is money, are going to start growing there. And you might have to get a new app into your phone to identify the new plants because people haven't seen them for a while. Sorry guys. Yes sir.
Would hay that's been, that has herbicide and all the sprays that have been sprayed on, would that be detrimental?
Yes.
Unrolling it onto the land? Would that
Yes. Detrimental. Try not. Try and find something. You don't have to get organic hay, people. In any case, organic has been hijacked anyway.
But if you can't find anything, that's your only hay on the outside?
I would then try and get some hay off your own property. Leave something in the yard where you can go and collect some hay and take it and put it in there. Okay. It's going to take time, so you've got time to plan and collect some carbon. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the recovery time relative to how to inclusion paddock versus traditional paddock? Longer to recover? Just non-selective?
I'm wanting you to observe. I'm wanting you to monitor. For the same reason you are now monitoring your grazing paddock, and when it has recovered, that has become your recovery period. You can do the same in that inclusion zone to work out the recovery period there. Over time, so maybe if you've got a 35-day recovery period and you've missed it out for the next graze, so ending up with 70 days recovery period, it might be then just starting to put up flowers. It takes pressure off you because it gives you time to graze your whole property at a slower pace because the recovery period is longer. Guys, it's amazing what it does to you as an individual. Not having to rush around, it's frenetic. Move. Just take it easy.
You know, it just occurred to me, Greg has an incredibly large number of paddocks. You're telling us to keep data on these paddocks and keep track of it with the inclusion zones and the paddocks and the growth and all this and other. So my question is really designed towards Greg. What system do you use and how do you keep track of it? Do you use a notebook to keep track of your paddocks, and how often do you go back in and look at them, look at the manure piles and look at all that stuff? How do you keep track of that data?
Yeah, so what we're using is basically a daily planning chart. I use the forestry management planning charts for years, and when we started going to more frequent moves, it just didn't work so well for us. So basically what we're looking at is recording how long it was before since the last time we were there. We know the mob of animals. So right now we have a sheep herd, we have a cow herd. Well, and the bulls. But the bulls will soon be joined back into the cows. We're trying, I monitor my rainfall right here. And I haven't had to write any down for 2 months, but I do keep a really close track on the rain. We haven't seen rain. I'm starting to crank them down, slow them down, so you don't get around so quickly. One of the biggest tools in your toolbox is to combine herds. Don't have 3 or 4 or 5 herds around your farm. We were in Texas 2 years ago. The ranch was a wreck, and I called him up later. He got in that drought they had, and we were there. They had 7 herds. I said, "How many do you have now?" He goes, "We got 8." So they went the other way, and yeah, it was just a colossal wreck. So we're concerned about recovery time. making sure that the plants are recovered before we go back. And a lot of it's right here, monitoring what's behind you. So in the springtime, when you take off grazing around the farm, put a marker out there. What you left. If you left 7-inch residual and it's growing back 1 inch a week, and you turn in at 10, you've got 3 weeks before you can come back. It's going to be growing back to 10 inches. But if you're not monitoring and measuring, you don't know what you've got. Yes?
What kind of rain gauge do you use? Is it just a glass one?
Yeah, I've got 3 of them. I don't trust a single rain gauge. I've got 3 of them out. And it's weird, folks. We can have one on one side of the house, on the other they're a 1/2 inch apart. It's all because of the way the rain's coming in there. So we put up several, and I take the average. Yes.
So we're using this for planning, but then we're confirming that by going and looking at the blade of grass and seeing what the recovery actually looks like, to see if it matches up with what we calculated.
That's right.
And then we tweak our calculation as we see.
Folks, that's what I got a problem with. These collars are coming out with put on cattle. You don't need any fence anymore. You just got a collar, and it shocks them if they get out of their zone. You can do it all from your phone. You're not out there observing the land. You're not out there observing animal health. You're managing blindly, but all the tech people, oh, this is the future. Maybe it is. Those collars are expensive. You gotta have a control, you gotta have really good cell coverage to run that thing. So be careful, don't gotta spend $30,000-$40,000 on cattle collars and expect that to save your ranch. It's probably not going to.
Guys, they're just going to find new ways of taking the money off you. But that's up to you. If you like technology, go for it. Be happy. Who cares? Excuse me.
You need to keep your eyes on the land. Keep it on the land.
The number of paddocks, you are welcome to include various paddocks, so you've got less calculations to do. So paddock number A is a combination of 1, 5, 7 and 6 paddocks and the number, and then you say so many days stay in paddock A, and you divide it amongst those paddocks. So you've got less calculations, and it's a matter of growing into what you need information to make the decisions that you're required to make sure that your animals are maximized. Any other questions? Good. Okay, thank you. Let's go on. So people concentrate on the red, don't go to the yellow. So somebody asked about inbreeding. This is a herd of Herefords in the Chihuahua Desert. It was started by a man called Fannin. For 100 years, they've had no genetic material brought into that herd. They are like peas in a pod. And when I talk about peas in a pod, people, it is form follows function. And the function of those animals is to reproduce, grow, and breed in the environment in which they're born. So how do we equate this? If you go and look in Africa at impala or springbok or whatever animal, they are split image of each other. You cannot do that if you are getting a bull from the other side of the world. But it's up to you. You decide. If you want bragging rights and it's important to you that you travel to Texas to buy a bull, I don't care. But remember, it does help to have 200 cows. Can I move on? Good. So we go back to Arkansas. Pretty picture. This was a rice farm. He bought it to shoot duck. And after 5 years, he decided his hobby was a bit expensive and he wanted to run cattle. So first of all, he bought cattle, and then he had an inclusion zone because the cattle plugged up the pastures. And when I got there, this is what I saw. And I said to him, really, you bought the bale shredder. Your assistant goes to a church where he negotiated with a congregation. He said, I will mow your properties and keep them nice and tidy as long as I can have the bales. Okay? So for a 5-10 mile radius, I can't remember how far around it was, but he collected bales and he collected something like 5,000 bales. He put them in the shredder. I suggest you do the paddocks instead of having an inclusion zone, which you destroyed, and you saw it earlier on that fence line. He went into these paddocks and he fed it all over. There was no pugging because the animals used the whole property. And this is what happened in 6 months. Same property. You could even see where the hay landed, people. And I have to show you this because I know you didn't believe me. Do you believe me now? No, probably not. But I've got to try. No fertilizer, just the old bales of whatever hay on the ground. And that's the change. Animal impact. Energy. All life needs energy. The soil has been woken up. All that compaction, the yellow flour, compaction, anaerobic soil, gone. Magic, people. It was magic. But that nature is forgiving. Any more questions on carbon? No. Shall we go into Central Texas, and this guy grew veg and some barley. He should have grazed it, but he was so proud of it he wanted me to see it, so he didn't graze it. If you see the yellow leaves at the bottom of the plant, you are wasting time and money. They are not photosynthesizing. Please, that veg should have been grazed twice already. So again, we come back to Greg's property, and there are his cattle, and I think this was Judy Farm, if I'm correct, Greg, where they went in, and it was a clover grass pasture on the first graze of the season, and there the cattle walked in and they're grazing. So we looked at the animal, and this is what it was grazing. Oh my goodness, it's grazing clover. And I've told you that clover is protein. That's what the pasture looked like, and in 2 hours that's what the pasture looked like. So at that time of the year, the clover had more energy. I keep saying to you, watch the cows. They're always trying to teach you or tell you something. And at that time of the year, the clover has more energy than the grass. The next graze, they wouldn't touch the clover, they ate the grass. So observe. Try and change your habit of the coffee shop and spend that time watching the cattle, and you will learn so much more. So again, we go into that flowered legumes and the result. But this is also on Greg's. He has been grazing in a vegetative stage for some time. Look at that dung pit. Seeds in the dung pit, but he was grazing in a vegetative stage. There is always some plant that is going to seed, and that plant has enough seed for anything. Don't ever buy, sorry, I hope there's no seed merchants here, any more seed. You don't have to. Nature will look after itself if you allow it. So we go to northern New York State, up near Cooperstown. These are the guys that got out of the stock market and bought land up there, broken down dairies. Those are their weaner calves, people. Look at it. Look how fat they are. Those are the 2-year-old animals. At 3, they slaughtered them and sent them into New York. Grass-fed beef. Premium. Look where they stored their bales. Carbon. That happened immediately the next spring. Look at all the clover and stuff coming up. So we go back to that property up near Lubbock, Texas. 125 yards by 125 yards. Grew enough grass to feed 1 cow for 1 day. 5 years later, the same property. Change in management. Look at the cows. I said to you that you're better off with a 60% reconception rate on 1,000 cows than 90% on 500 cows. He had improved the land, but he hadn't caught up with numbers of cattle. Look at the cattle, pig fat, too fat. So it's easy to get 90%. You just sell off cattle, get fewer cattle, and you'll get 90% because the energy is there. Energy makes animals fat. But do the calculations. He's put in a watering system, $2.3 million US. It is the equivalent of buying another 6 ranches. He's got a stream through the middle, a river, which didn't run all year. It was the river that I showed you in the yesterday. It's now running all year because of increased animal impact, carbon in the soil, holding the water back from the rain. That's him putting in, and people at the top end, those pipes are 6 inches in size. 12 storage tanks, automatically monitored. It shows up on his cell phone if there leaks on the pipe. He has confidence. Sadly for me, there's confidence in me because I'm now nervous. He's put the pressure on me. He's got to make it work, and he's doing well. So we go to the Chihuahua Desert, and this guy said to me, I have read the journals of my forefathers, and when they came into the Chihuahua, the grass grew to the stirrups on the horse. And he sent me a postcard with that photograph. And every day since, he's done the same, a year anniversary. But sadly, he was struck by lightning looking after his cattle just the other day in Chihuahua. Lightning struck him and he's gone.
Which rancher was that?
Marco Barunda. He was in with Gorilla and all those guys.
Tavio and
Tavio. So we're looking at a different environment. That's semi-desert. We go to Namibia in southern Africa, and that's semi-desert as well. Underutilized grass, and yet they're going out and they're leasing more properties. What for? So the couple that had 2 brothers who were in partnership owned 2 properties, they leased another property and bought another property. And this is what they had, underutilization. Look at the thorn trees, totally fungal, growing thorn trees. Selling wood into Cape Town to keep the ranch, to get enough money for cash flow. I mean, it's crazy, people. But admittedly, where they had cut the trees out, that's what it looked like. Beautiful. 8-inch, 10-inch rainfall. And on the other side, this is a guy who's working with me in terms of his cattle. And unfortunately, you won't hear them bellowing, but I can hear them in my ears. Sadly, with hearing aids, it goes straight through here and doesn't come out. No supplements.
Ian, what would those cows weigh?
They weight.
Yeah, what would be the weight on those?
I reckon they're 420, 440 kgs. Real animals. Yes, sir.
What breed of cattle is that?
The Beefmaster cross Droughtmaster. The other half of the ranch, he had done non-selective grazing, and I didn't even show you the photograph. There is not a blade of grass, and we're 2 years after they grazed it. Not a blade, because they never had any rain. They can go 7 years with no rain. And this is what we've done, is manipulate the fungal bacterial relationship to achieve what we want to achieve. And that guy was not cutting trees, people. That one that I've just come from. So if we go back. That one. He was not cutting trees. That is the natural tree to grass mix that happened. And where he did not selective grazing, there's not a blade of grass. Just pure red sand. So we go to Pennsylvania, fescue. The same guy who we did with the dairy cows, the jerseys and the horses, came to another school and he said, I can't graze the grass, it's fescue and it's gone to seed. He grazed, he made walkways, walked the dairy cattle from the top of the hill before they got to the dairy at the bottom, and this is what he achieved. He put it back in a vegetative stage and he could graze it again. It works, people. Just animal impact. You don't need a machine, and I don't have a machine. He was an Amishman, and I go around in style. They don't take me in a gator or anything. They put me in a wagon and haul me around.
Can you elaborate on that again? Sometimes I'm like the guy over there, sometimes I miss something. Can you go back one slide?
Not a problem.
The other one with the black lines on it. Yeah.
So those black lines are electric fencing. So he worked zigzag through his pastures because he didn't believe what I tell him.
Didn't say that.
No, told him. I know you didn't. I assumed that. But got a reaction. So now you're listening. He walked his cattle. And I said the best way to prove it to yourself is to do a zigzag. And then next time it's recovered. So the next picture, this one, it had given a recovery period, which probably was about 21 days in Pennsylvania. And then he let his Jersey cattle walk from the paddock where he was down to the dairy, and they chose the areas that he'd walked them on before with fencing, and they grazed it, and they did well. So he did that, and then he moved the fencing across and trod some more and extended the mountain. The trouble is now he's got so much milk because he's doubled his dairy herd. His father can't make cheese with it all, and so when I say the trouble, so now the extended family has come in and they're all making cheese. So they've got 4 families making cheese off cows which originally only had enough milk for one to make this milk.
How long?
That's what I call a champagne problem.
How long or how many times would he walk them to achieve that?
Depending on the number of animals you've got, by putting lanes up, you're extending the size of the herd. So he only had 60 or something dairy cows, so it was relatively narrow. So by the time you've done 60 cows and they've walked through a narrow space, you've exacerbated the energy, the kinetic energy and symbiotic energy that's going into the ground.
So this isn't really grazing, it's just walking.
Just walk. There's nothing to graze there, it's inedible. Whoops.
Is there any trailing that happens?
No, because they're dense.
The dense, okay.
And they walk from the top to the bottom and can't take them all an hour and a half. So I'm just wanting to tell you that the fungal bacterial relationship, what it creates. So this guy's property, and it's the one up in the panhandle of Texas, had a fire. And 2 years later, that's what his ranch looked like. But different areas, different heat from the fire, same ranch, different flowers. Changed fungal bacterial relationship, same ranch, different flowers. Different plants will grow. And I can do this because I visit so many properties, and I can use examples and what needs to be done to achieve whatever you want. Whatever I've said, I promise you somewhere it works, and you can make it work if that's your desire. If you believe that I'm talking rubbish, I promise you it won't work for you. But that's your choice. So it's underutilized grass in Zimbabwe. Should have a higher density, but you've got a problem in herding because people were given a bonus with herding if they didn't lose any cattle. Well, of course they didn't let the cattle graze because they still got the bonus if they hadn't lost any cattle. Do you understand what I'm saying? So they kept the cattle together and it was a disaster. But anyway, they had inclusion zones where they slept their cattle, and of course in an inclusion zone there is massive animal impact. The cattle stayed in the same place or slept in the same place for a week. It produced very palatable grasses. It was like an inclusion zone. It was an enclosure to keep the hyena, leopard and lion out. And they were getting problems because in that enclosure it was overgrazed by the wild animals. I don't know how many species they've got, but they've got everything. From giraffe all the way through to warthog, bush pig, name it, they've got it. And that is overgrazed grass lying on the ground, shouting for help. That's why it goes flat on the ground, hoping that a ruminant can't put its tongue around it and eat it again. So again, it's Elaine Ingham's work, and we manage that to achieve that, the fungal-bacterial relationship, to grow on top of the soil, because we know what grows on the soil is a mirror image of what is in the soil, and I'm sorry if you guys are tired of seeing that. But the more you see it, the more it'll have imprinted on your mind, and you will know what is required. So we go to high desert. And this guy is in the high areas of Utah, close to Idaho. And he had 2,000 cows in a herd. That's what the ground looked like. That rained probably a year ago. They get very little rain. Look at the plant spacings. You think you got problems? Nothing compared to these guys. So that's what the plants looked like. They were dying because no animal impact, no life in the soil. Put the animals in, and immediately the animals were there. This is now less than a week later. And look at the green already coming through in that grass. That's how quick the reaction is. Break the capping, include animal impact. There they are. The paddock was too big to collect them with the horses. We collected them, two of us, with vehicles charging around that land, and it had superb suspension. I mean, you rushed around there at a huge pace. I'm only showing you this because it puts up how easy you've got it. We go to South Texas, near McAllen. Guy came to a course. His wife had died from Lyme's disease, and he didn't want to go into the house. So he went back after the course, hired a bulldozer, and bulldozed fence lines. 2.5 acres a paddock. That's what it looked like. Because it hadn't had cattle on for over 40 years, there was no grass. There's only trees. They're the cattle eating the trees, Corrientes type cattle. No grass, people. That's what the bush looked like when they moved out. I can't remember the stock density, but he moved these cattle every hour and a half in an acre or 2.5 acres, and that's what the trees looked like. This is what the ground looked like. Here they had just walked in before I realized I should have taken a photo. And you can see some of them had walked in, but there's no grass there to eat. That's what it looked like an hour and a half later. The dung beetles had already caught up. You see the dung beetles rolling the ball there. Dung beetles followed them. So they had some rain that winter, and the next spring this is what the property looked like. Broadleaf weeds, we had disturbed it. So these are the lines where he put his fencing. A year after that photograph, so 2.5 years from starting, that's what his property looked like. I don't want you to lose your wife if you have a wife, just to achieve that. But nobody has ever achieved what he's achieved there, that I know of. And that's why I just went crazy taking photographs, because I couldn't believe it. Absolutely fascinating. So there, look at the plant spacings from pure sand.
So he unrolled hay?
No, nothing. Just animal impact.
He did it on sand.
Sand. Well, it's where he is actually sand with a bit of clay. Further west from there is pure sand.
It's a very brittle environment. I mean, once they get 8 inches of rain a year,
8 to 10, yeah.
yeah,
But in a good year, they can get 25.
then it comes all at once a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So is that all from just the latent seed then?
I can't hear.
From latent seeds, is that all? What that is from
The
seeds
seed was there.
and that's survived for decades, hundreds of years.
The seed hadn't, well, the cattle hadn't been there for over 40 years. Between 40 and 60 years, I'd had no cattle on that property. So the seed bank or grasses producing seed were reducing as the bush got thicker and thicker and thicker. And the Panicum maximum, which is a grass from Africa and grows in shade, is full up there now that he's using it. And his son, he's died, and his son's taken over the property and is running there over 2,000 head of cattle in one herd.
So once that level of disturbance occurs that allow those seeds to become viable again, what has allowed them to live for decades? Like, what has allowed them to not be composed?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What has allowed that seed to stay viable for 100 years?
Because nature knew we were going to mess up. So you've read the periodicals and the books, and that's why they write there and say you need new seed, because otherwise they can't sell anything to you. I'm telling you, you don't need the seed. Don't read the book.
It just seems amazing that when everything else in the soil decomposes, that the seed itself has remained in some state.
Seed has a protection.
That's what I'm asking.
And there are all sorts of mechanisms nature has in keeping that seed viable. Whether it's taken by birds and then dropped in the feces, and I don't know what it all is, because it's too big a subject for me to get involved in. I concentrate on what I hope good at, and that's what I do. There's too much information out there. I said to you right at the beginning, I'm not an expert. Experts know it all. I will never know it all. I keep learning every year, and I come across things like this. I meet people trying things that you would imagine are unbelievable, like this guy. I mean, this is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Ian, you got a question right there.
Yes, sir.
So I'm sure it varies by species, but what's the average length of time that the seed bank can survive, and then when you make the conditions right, it starts to grow? And then also, is it a requirement that at some time in the past there had to be pasture there, or there had to be grassland there? If something's been a deciduous hardwood forest for 150 years, is there a seed bank there too?
There's
lying
some
dormant?
sort of seed bank, but a different seed bank. So you might need to put some bales down to get the seed bank resuscitated in terms of what you need for livestock. But just by putting animals in, you'll probably grow more tree-type species before you can change the fungal-bacterial relationship to grow grasses, because there weren't inherently grasses there for a very, very, very long time.
On our pasture walk today, you go up Devil's Washboard, and you get to the corner of Devil's Washboard and Hussey, we have a civil pasture on the left. It's been there now 12 years. The first year we cleared the trees off, and we left some trees out there, but the first plant that came up was big blue stem. And it was not in the hay. We didn't have any big blue stem hay, but that seed had laid there. My uncle bought that farm in 1948. It wasn't there then, and it was all woods. It was all woods. And so that seed's been there for a long time. But once we cleared it, brought animals in, boom, there it was. So, yeah, trust your seed bank.
So we go back to what I showed you yesterday in Lesotho. 150 years they've never seen clover or cool season grasses. Fuller. Yes, sir.
Just a comment to this gentleman's question in terms of, I don't know how long, like every seed, but these two, so in Medina, so 2,000 years ago, Rome was invading, and there were these Jewish rebels up in the hills. So they recently found up in Medina a couple pots full of Judean date palms, which has been extinct for 2,000 years. They brought them back. So
It is
it's amazing.
fantastic. Nature is forgiving. It's unbelievable what can happen. I don't think we know to what extent. We're still learning. And the more you guys do it and learn about your own properties, more information is going to come out. You must remember that the source of new information is coming from people on the land now, and not from academic institutions which use small plots to try and prove things. It's coming from actual situations, and that's great. Good. So we move on, and again we look at that soil with the dung thing, and this is a couple of years later. Look at the condition of those same cattle. Corrientes type, and he's put on them reasonable type bulls, which he bought from his friend down the road, and they have improved in the type of animal. Now again, you probably don't believe me, so I've had to show you this picture of a fence line where the people on the left-hand side do conventional grazing, and the guy on the right-hand side for 18 months only, and it's in the McAllen area, was used what I taught you. Look what happened.
It's that darn fence line. It gets more rain than a neighbor does. Folks, I've been there on that fence line, and I've never seen more dung beetles in my life than what was on this side. There's thousands of them, and the manure paths did not stick around. They're just gone. Just gone. In one day, just gone. We don't have dung beetles like what they got down in South Texas. No way. That's sand. That's very sandy soil.
But he's also achieved something that I didn't believe achievable. One bite off most plants. That's what he left behind. Impressive, people. Even the grass growing near the trees, up the trees, the cattle had put their tongue around it and taken a bite off it.
Ian, that's taken place in a relative short time period.
Huge. Really, it was 18. That one there was longer. It was 4 years.
Because I was down there like 6 years ago, and it was prickly pear, and yeah.
No, he's been unbelievable. But he's one of these guys, you tell him something, he goes out tomorrow and does it. I mean, he went from 180 cars to 3,500. Yes.
On the prickly pear and the mesquites and the other brush, did he do any mechanical removal aside from the fence lines?
No. He still has the tools. He's got them down massive. Do you see his tools that he used to run over the brush with?
No, but
He doesn't use it anymore. He's using cattle.
He's using cattle, but about 4 months ago, I asked him, what is the difference in stock days per acre relative to what your father used to have as hay camps and bush camps? Now, his bush camps, besides the road around the fence line, are so thick that I know I'm quite large, but I can't walk in there. Okay? So the cattle he's been grazing now, I don't know how many years, it's more than 8 or 9 years. The cattle in some of those paddocks have never got to the center because the bush is so thick. So we try to compare what a bush camp was yielding in stock days per acre compared to a hay paddock. And it was 13 times 13 times. So we did a calculation, and it would pay him to buy the biggest excavator to do the job, to rip them out. And if he did every 5th paddock to start with and remove the trees, and why I say 5th paddock, at 3,500 head of cattle, he still hadn't got enough cattle to rehabilitate the soil to plant grass, the fungal bacterial relationship when he'd rip the trees out. So it was every 5th paddock. And then he could come back and do every 3rd paddock. And as he cleaned it out and left that sort of number of trees, it would be, I don't know, equivalent of more than 13 new ranches. And if his ranch at the moment is carrying 3,500, I eventually said to him, what is enough? You know, what do you want to do? Do you want to manage people or do you want to manage livestock? And he said, oh, really, I quite enjoy doing anything as long as it's a challenge. Interesting.
So he did use mechanical to
No, he hasn't yet, but he's bought the machine,
Okay.
and he fixed his family's roads on all the ranches to shoot bobwhite quail. Okay? The machine's now paid for because his family is paid for it, and he's going to start opening up paddocks.
So what we're looking at here,
No, this was
Wasn't
his
mechanical.
father's hay paddock.
okay.
Okay? So that for years hasn't had any mechanical work on it, just cattle. And the cattle came out of there. That photograph was taken at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the cattle moved.
That's what they left.
They left. Impressive. So what I've been talking about is achievable, and that's why I'm showing you all these things, just to get you to believe me. You don't have to. But in the wet areas, look what happened. The grass was above my head, and he put the cattle in, and that's what's happened. That's what's left behind. When the other grasses, the shorter type grass, has one bite taken off, this was just trodden on the ground. Wow, you know what's going to happen here? Even more grass.
Is that what you want an inclusion zone to look like?
Well, it would look a bit like that when they're being trodden on the ground. And that was just in the paddock. So back home, that is a plant that I've never seen. I've been on the ranch all my life. It's like a cowpea. And when I stopped burning and I was practicing planned grazing, this plant appeared on all the hills. And in the winter time, I didn't have to feed any supplementation in the form of protein for the cattle to eat the tall, long grass, because there was enough protein in this plant. So nature had it all, but we as humans destroyed it. So in Bowie, I've been working with a guy for just over 20 years now. Yes, sir.
So, how did you know, if you didn't know what that plant was, how did you know you didn't have to plant, feed protein?
Sorry, had protein.
Yeah, I got a little excited here. So you made the comment you did not have to feed protein that winter because of that, but if you didn't know what that plant was, how did you know what protein was?
Because when you look at the leaf, it's got a legume leaf on it. And it had pods on it, and they had seeds. And I know that those seeds, when I watched the cattle went in there, the first thing they harvested the seeds. They harvested the pods. Then they ate the plant. And I didn't have to give supplementation. I monitor my cattle with dung in the winter. When the dung starts getting hard, they're running short of protein. If you understand that the property, I had 2 bricks on my property, immediately you go into winter, I had no green in the winter. I've got this tall grass that you drive a pickup into it, you won't see the pickup, you're growing so much grass. Okay? The cattle go in and they eat that and they're fine for a certain time. And the longer you leave them there, now it's non-growing season, I've got no green, I've got this huge amount of grass that's growing on the property because I haven't got enough livestock. The dung starts getting harder and harder. So instead of going shop, 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 which it does in the growing season, you get a doof, doof sound when it drops out the back. Immediately we're in a protein shortage. So those grasses, if I analyze the grass, I've got a 2% protein, which is not enough. I need to get up at least to 8%. And I use urea to start with to push it up there. And I've subsequently killed many cattle, and don't use urea anymore, but use cotton seed. Now, cotton seed has the protein and the energy, because the oil in the seed is energy, hydrogen, and I've more balanced my cattle with a diet in the winter with little heaps of cotton seed just to see them through. But over a period of time, all the cool season grasses, which I've never seen on the property, clovers, cool season grasses started to grow. The more carbon I put on the soil, the longer the period of the cool season grasses could grow. Because the carbon was storing the moisture from the summer, which is 28 inches, and releasing it through the winter. So those green cool season plants protected by this forest of dry grass underneath was green. And I then stopped feeding protein and just grazed. The cattle did better, I made more money, everybody's happy. Am I talking sense?
Believe it or not, that all made sense. I mean, not even BSing you, right? Not all.
I'm pleased. Guys, it works, I promise you. I wouldn't be telling you if it didn't. I don't want to lie to anybody. This is from personal experience and experience of my clients. And I have told you nothing about what doesn't work. It all works. And this guy 20 years ago said to me, never talk to me again about killing mesquite trees with cattle. He says it's impossible. I said, okay. He's become a good friend of mine. And the other day he sent me 2 photographs, these 2. Mesquite tree has borer in it and it's died. Why? Because he has changed the fungal bacterial relationship in the soil, not conducive for mesquite trees, and they've got borer in them. Look at it. And all he said was, send me the pictures and sorry, I didn't believe you. It took 20 years. So there it is, the guys have been spraying mesquite, and they killed the grass, they killed life in the soil. The problem is they don't change management, and they're just going to grow more mesquite. And we go back to the important pH 7. It is extremely important, people. It'll help you so much in terms of monitoring what is happening from your grass in relationship to your cattle. Again, look at the dung, understand the full left-hand side, and it all helps with this. 5 cows, take the average, it's an indicator. Any questions on that? And you guys can get that pH paper 4 to 9 in this country. You can order it. I've ordered 3 lots and I've never received them in my country. They disappear. Our postal service, our mail service does not operate anymore. Yes, ma'am.
So if pH is too high, you give them like apple cider vinegar, bring the game back down. But what if the pH is too low? What do you use that?
pH low, you need more protein.
Thank you.
Be careful of using urea. It does kill cattle. Any other questions on that? Good. So we go, yes ma'am.
Can you use a green-brown ratio? Make changes in the green-brown ratio to do the same thing without bringing anything in?
So if the question was, can you use the green-brown ratio to balance the diet of the animals? Absolutely. Those cool season grasses underneath with the green are high in protein. So that is the protein and the energy. And then the tall grass is the oxygen. And we've got a balanced diet. With the green there, the dung will be relatively loose and work for you. Good. So we go to the west coast, and those are annual grasses only. And it's in those areas with less than 8 inches of rain a year. It's on the west coast of Namibia. Look at the size of the elephants. They are small. Form follows function. So you need to have animals that produce on your ground with the amount of energy that you capture, and we move on and we go to the other side of our country, on the east coast. Look at the size of the elephant. They are huge because abundant food, high rainfall, different environment.
Oh my. Uh-oh.
That happened to be a Texan visiting. Sorry about your state. Texans not all. Up the road, I'm here.
Whoops.
Any questions, people? Yes, sir.
You say follow the money, so it makes sense, but I've been told numerous times that red clover has to be replanted every 2 years. And then you made the comment, and Greg has showed it in multiple videos, red clover keeps coming back. True? False? What's the scoop here?
Yeah, we have the only red clover I put down was on a new farm. A guy, we just leased it, and it didn't have any on it. And I wanted to jump start it, I just put it down. And then we had a drought, so it didn't come up. But on our personal farms, the other 18 farms we have, we don't put clover seed down, and we got clover on all of them. So don't graze that clover off too short in the fall. It'll put on a seed, and you'll go out in the winter time or late fall, you'll see clover plants coming up in the manure. It's red clover plants from the animals that have eaten those black seed heads, and it's energy. It's energy. So they're eating that, and they're repopulating your farm. So clover's expensive. I found that out. It's went up since I bought it. It's not cheap.
Was that red clover seed that you put out, went through the drought, didn't come up, will it come up next year?
It'll come up. Yeah, I've heard that. I think it's true. You'll never waste the red clover seed. It'll stay there until it gets an opportunity to come up, and I've seen that. We put the bowls on that farm. I mean, we really worked it over this winter. And if we'd have had rain, that clover would have exploded up. Because we had some bare soil spots for it to germinate. We just haven't had any rain for it to do that. So if we get a fall rains, or if we get any rain this summer, I think we're still going to see it. But, yeah. When you seed, you're always taking a risk. You're always taking a risk. That's the problem I have with cover crops. Everybody says cover crops can heal the world. Well, maybe, but what if it doesn't rain? Doc Kincaid, right up here at Harrisburg, you know Doc. He went 2 years in a row. He spent $3,000 to $4,000. One year he spent almost $7,000 on cover crop seeds. And I could count the plants that came up across his farm. I could count them on my hand. Where'd that money go? It went to the seed companies. So be careful.
Any more questions? Good, guys. Can I just say something about, I've got a couple of days left, and if anybody would like me to visit them, I've got some forms here which I don't promise I can visit because I've only got 2 days. I don't occupy. I'm very happy to try and help people if I can, and these forms are here, but I'm traveling north. So if you're south from here, unlikely I'll get to you. There are not all that many forms because I don't want too many applications. But those of you who'd like to, you're welcome to fill them in and then talk to my wife. She plans my trip and tells me where to go, and I just turn up and talk. Thank you, Greg, for the moment.
All right. I don't have the boss here yet telling us it's ready to eat, so let's take some questions. Yes, sir.
I'll go ahead and ask one more. So, I'm very fortunate in that I'm the guy who lives in Southern Little County, right, Jeff? So, I've got some pastures down there that my neighbors are letting me hay. And you made the comment the other day, yesterday, I think, I just barely caught it, but you said I thought you said leaving a pasture just in hay is not necessarily a good thing. So I've got landowners that won't let me do it, that, I haven't talked about it, don't do anything but hay on that. And what's the repercussion? Because I buy into what Ian says. I'm buying into it. I see where the cattle will have the effect. So what's happening where the cattle aren't doing something with the hay fields?
Yeah, so you're basically mining the soil.
Yep.
You're taking those nutrients off. As you continue to do that in Boone County, I don't even know where your farm is, but I can tell you what's going to happen. The whole farm will be solid broom sedge. And it may take 10 years, but you'll get there. Right down the road here, we go to our farm walk, folks. There's just as we leave, you go down this hill, there's a gate there on the left, and it's just solid, that whole farm's solid broom sedge. 120 acres. I can remember when it was a thriving cattle farm. The new owner that bought it, no livestock. It's cedars and broom sedge, but he gave the hay away, gave the hay away, gave the hay away, because it looked pretty. You know, they'd mow that stuff off. And the hay guy told him every year, well, I'm just making it better. It just gets a little better every year. Well, it got a little better in broom sedge every year. And finally, this cattle wouldn't eat the hay anymore, so he stopped haying it. So now he's got a bankrupt farm. So that's what it is. You're bankrupting that farm. Unless you put fertilizer and lime down, you got to put something back.
We are.
Yeah. And then you're not going to end up with broom sedge. But talk them into putting the animals on it if it's any way possible. That's where you'll make your money. It's not in hay. It's grazing.
I eat the hay, so it works for me.
Yeah, well, if it's working and you're making money and you're happy, be happy as he is. Any other questions? Yeah, Ricardo, we'll get you. Yeah.
In your second book, you spoke about the color of the animals and the temperature. I was wondering if maybe both you and Ian can.
Yeah, so the question is the color of the animals, you know, what's the importance of having, let's say, a red-hided versus a black-hided animal? They did a temperature gradient test in Gillette, Wyoming. They put a surface thermometer on a red one. They put a surface thermometer on a black one. And they measured them at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The red-hided, well, the temperature that day was 105. I think the red one was like 108. And the black one was 132. So there's a major difference just in hair coat color. And so I live here in Missouri, we get hot. That's why I went with red cattle. We started with black. And you go out there and they're panting and sitting in the pond, standing in the shade. They're not out grazing. I don't want that. I want them to be out where they can take the heat. Ian says that shade's a non-issue. Ian hasn't been in Missouri in July when there's 100% humidity. I like a shade tree. I think our cattle are more comfortable if they got some shade. They perform better. I'll tell you something about a black cow. If you don't give them shade, they'll slip a calf. I had it happen. Yep. In 1 week we slipped 3. They aborted those calves. They couldn't hold them. They just got so darn hot. We didn't ever lose one out of a red cow like that. So be careful. Missouri, it can get brutal. You can only breathe the air. It's that hot. Yes?
So do you always provide shade in the summertime?
Not always. No, I mean, if it's good, if I look at the temperature, we're going to get up to 100 that day, I'll make sure they can come back to some breeze. That's just me. Now, there's probably people that don't do that, but I've seen our South Pole go out at 1 o'clock. It's so dang hot, you can't really stand the sun on you. They're out there grazing in that stuff. And that's only South Pole. No other cows can do that. Yes. Did you have a
Yeah, so I was telling Ian, I have a farm that I'm trying to, bring into a lot better production, and I've been rolling out a lot of hay, cheap hay, first crop hay, junk hay. But I'm also in corn country, and so I have a lot of corn stalk bales that this time of year they give them away pert near.
Carbon.
And I got a neighbor that's got a whole several years worth of supply. So I'm listening to comments about what they're spraying. It's all GM corn. If a guy can haul those for nothing, basically your time and fuel, does a guy roll them out and put animals on it, say in the fall or going into winter?
My first preference would be hay, but if I couldn't get a hold of hay, and it's a carbon source, and I've got broken land, I'd bring it in. What would your, Ian?
If you've got no other source of hay, bring it in. It'll soon work its way out of your soils.
Folks, we custom grazed cattle for many years. I had to ivermectin them. Well, I didn't get cattle. And it killed me watching them pour that ivermectin on their back as they came out of the trailer. That's when they did it. I'm like, oh man. But I did that for 7 years. I call it, I slept with the devil for 7 years. I don't do that anymore. And it's, you know, our souls are recovered, but you do what you got to do to make a living. Yes, sir.
My cousin come up with an idea that's just blown up into a huge thing. There's been in our neighborhood, there's places where people feed in a sacrifice lot, and then they pile the shit up, and then the crap and all the detritus and stuff, and you got these big mountains that have been there for decades, you know, where they just moved their feeding area, and there you got this big windrow. So he bought him a really nice manure spreader, and he started making deals. I'll spread it for half. He's always had dump trucks, so now he's getting calls at least once a week on people wanting to come spread his, you know. And some people just say, "I want it gone."
Yeah, they don't want to look at it.
It's done a huge thing for his place.
Yeah. These confinement people that put their animals in one area for the whole winter, it's just a mess by the end of the winter, and you'll see a big pile of it up there. And yeah, if you can get a hold of that. Horse people clean out the stalls and they'll just let it mound up out there. People say, well, what about the wormers they're giving those horses? Don't worry about it. It's organic matter. Get it on your farm. Compost it. Let it go through a compost. If it's still heating, that manure's still heating and smoke's coming on and heat's coming. It's gotten anaerobic. Don't be putting that out in there. And let it go through the heat. And then when it's broke down, then put it out. Any other question? Yes, sir.
So a lot of my land is a pecan grove that we actually harvest every year, and we're taught by the extension office to leave the grass really short like a golf course, so it's not competing with the trees aren't competing with the grass. So my question is, if I do this and help the land out, I mean, is that going to leach from the trees, or is that just nonsense?
I don't believe that particularly. We have also gone into planting trees. Our son has planted a lot of pecan trees. And my recommendation to him was that if he mowed the grass, is to rake it towards the pecan trees and mulch them with the grass.
Really?
Okay. Yes, and that will prevent
They tell
it.
you to actually spray the
Oh,
ground around
no. That's, you do what you need to do.
No, I didn't do it, but I'm just telling you what they tell you to do.
Yeah, well, if you believe them, do it. If you don't.
I have a client in Florida, and he's doing really, it's all it is, a pecan grove. He's running cattle and sheep in there, and he's doing real well. And no chemicals, no spraying. Before he picks the pecans, he does have to go in there and mow it down so they can shake the trees that get the pecans. He's cranking. He's got sheep and cattle dumping there. They got shade. It's just a wonderful environment.
You say you had warm season grass on, or you're starting to get or do you have a mix?
Say that again.
Did you say your farm had warm season grass on?
It used to, because we burnt every spring.
Okay.
That was the tradition in the area. We stopped burning. I grew so much grass that my cattle died because there was no green grass. Strange, isn't it? My cattle died in grass that I couldn't find them. And they died of starvation.
You're feeding them basically trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was such coarse grass, and there was so much of it, I couldn't eat it. Yes,
I just want to go back to the water, watering your cattle. You're in Africa. I'm assuming that your summertime temperatures are up there quite a ways.
Correct.
How are you running your paddocks to give them access to water? Because you're running a paddocks off the river, correct?
Correct. They all drink out of rivers, ponds, or streams, and they've got access to water, and they walk to water. But again, if you've got piped water and you've got drinking troughs, and the cattle won't drink the water, try putting in some swimming pool chlorine, get a bottle like that. Put a hole in the middle with a penknife. Turn it this way up, take the top off, pour chlorine in, put the top on, turn it upside down in the middle of your drinking trough, piece of string to a rock in the middle. It'll bob in the waves as the wind blows and dispense chlorine through the hole. The cattle will start drinking the water.
It's called hypochlorite. You can buy it at Walmart. They're little 1 ounce tablets. So a 1 ounce tablet will treat 400 gallons of water. Don't go any higher than that. And you can't throw the tablet in the tank. Vader used to, his dad would tell him to go out and treat that water, and Vader, they're just throwing it in the tank, and when they drain the tank, there'd be like 30 tablets in the bottom. You gotta keep it suspended in that float.
But so they have free access to the water
Yeah.
all day. You're not taking them to water in the morning and the evening.
No, what I was talking about, that's my home property, but in Namibia, there is no water. So they walk.
Because I've got, you know, basically 2 miles between water troughs. And I want to run paddocks and get this soil right.
Cattle walk 23 kilometers in a day grazing. Nothing.
Why wouldn't they drink the water? You said add chlorine. What is about the water that they wouldn't drink it?
If you've got sulfur in the water, they tend not to drink it. But then you aerate the water. Instead of spraying out of a pipeline, you need to spray it up and splash it. Sometimes anaerobic bacteria get into the pipes and they change the flavor of the water. Particularly if you've got steel pipes, it tastes the water and you need to change it. If an animal goes to the water and puts its nose in and swallows 72 times, the water's good. Don't send it to the lab. They'll tell you all sorts of things you don't want to hear. So if an animal goes to the water and then goes to the ball valve and licks the water and blows on the water, there's something wrong with your water.
Okay, yes. We'll get Ricardo and we'll get you the back. Yes.
Ian, can you weigh in on the color of the animals?
Sorry?
Can you weigh in on the color of the animals?
Yes, we tend to, the preference in the country is red cattle or Brahman, white cattle. And that is probably due to the heat. You don't get a premium for black or what have you like in this country. You'll get a premium for red cattle.
On the back? Yep.
From the cattle drinking from the river, have you had to deal with liver flukes?
Yes, we get liver fluke, but again, liver fluke eggs are on the base of the plant. So if you're overgrazing and you're taking 3, 4, 5 bites per plant, they'll pick up liver fluke, particularly in river bottoms. If you're taking 1 bite off the top, you will not get liver fluke.
Yes, sir, right here.
You talked about in dry weather moving the cattle slower. And
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
So when you get in a drought situation and you haven't had any rain, your plants are not regrowing. You're monitoring behind you. There's nothing coming back. Well, number one, combine the herds. That's number one. Put your herds together. Number two, call animals. Get rid of all the non-breeding animals. All the steers go. Get rid of the bulls. And like Ian said, there should be another 34% of your cows you should already have marked. And those are the cows that have an enlarged tit. Maybe they gave you a foot issue. They got a bad temperament. They didn't shed off. Whatever. They gave you a dinky calf. Those all need to go. And so when you get rid of all that, now you don't have as many mouths out there. The longer you procrastinate, folks, in 2012 we got hammered here. We had the driest year ever on recorded history. I knew we were in trouble at the grazing school, and then that's when he held it in April. Everybody's around here brush hogging. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, it was dry. We had a dry winter. We didn't have any moisture in the winter either. And they're out here brush hogging the fields. I'm selling the animals. And so by the time July 1st hit, I got top price for all the animals. We reduced our herd size by a third, and we just glided through the drought. So we slowed them down. We had a 120-day rest period that summer, 120 days before we came back. We were able to do that because we reduced the size of our herd. We put them in tighter, moved them slower. Nutrient density skyrocketed in those plants. There was a lot more minerals in them. They didn't need to eat as much. So you get in a drought, your grass is stronger. Remember that.
So by reducing.
Yes, I know what you're going to say. Let me finish your sentence for you. By putting them in a small herd, they're going to overgraze. Well, it's better to overgraze a small portion than it is your whole farm. I used to do that. I opened the darn gates. Opened the gates and gave them my whole farm. Then they overgrazed everything. Then I had to feed hay for 9 months. Because I wasn't smart enough to sell the cows. I ended up with more money in the cows than what they were worth. Don't ever feed through a drought. Sell them. Sell them. You're trying to buy time for a rain.
And yes, he had to fight the wife because I really didn't agree with him that summer. But it was hard. It was hard. We had just finally gotten our numbers to where we wanted them to be, and we were, starting to get a pipeline for butchering. And there goes all the 2-year-olds. There goes all the 1-year-old steers. And I'm out of the butchering business, or selling steers. And he's like, we got to keep the mama cows or we won't have anything. And he was right.
Yeah. Did you hear that one, right? It's only happened once in a very
Greg, if you want to do this, if you're in stopping point.
Yep. All right, folks. Bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, which we're about to receive from thy bounty, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right, so after lunch,